Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down complex events by going straight to the source material. Today, we're dissecting a crisis that literally brought the world to a standstill, the 2026 closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So picture this. In early March of 2026, 20%, one-fifth of the entire world's daily oil supply just vanished. Poof. Gone from the market. That's exactly what happens when the planet's most vital maritime choke point for energy gets slammed shut. And the market's reaction? Utter chaos. Brent crude oil prices skyrocketed to $126 a barrel. Now, to give you some perspective, that surge was faster and way more severe than anything we'd seen in recent history. Yep, even more than the conflicts in Ukraine or Iraq. The impact was, immediate and it was global. But the cause? It was incredibly precise. To really get our heads around how this all happened, we need to rewind and look at the one single event that lit the fuse. Now, you may think a crisis like this started at sea, maybe with a tanker incident or a blockade, but it didn't. This whole thing began from the air, with a military strike aimed right at the very top of the Iranian regime. The operation that acted as the catalyst was codenamed Epic Fury. On February 28th, these coordinated strikes hit a whole bunch of high-value targets. But the single most significant result? The death of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Iran's response was swift and it was absolutely furious. They unleashed this massive barrage of missiles, and not just at Israel, but also at U.S. bases all across the Gulf. We're talking places like the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain. Just like that, the region was plunged into a full-blown war. So with the Middle East basically on fire, all eyes, and I mean all eyes, turned to this tiny 21-mile-wide strip of water that is, for all intents and purposes, the jugular vein of the world's energy supply, the Strait of Hormuz. And the stakes here? They just couldn't be higher. A staggering 84% of the 20 million barrels of oil that squeeze through that strait every single day are headed for Asia. This means that the economies of countries like China and India are critically, existentially dependent on this one waterway staying open. On the water itself, the situation just deteriorated with breathtaking speed. I mean, within hours of those first airstrikes, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, started broadcasting warnings to all ships, stay away. By March 1st, those warnings became action. The first tanker was hit. Just a day later, an IRGC official made it official. The strait was closed. And let's be clear, this blockade was completely indiscriminate. This wasn't targeted at just one or two countries. As the attacks piled up, you see ships flying flags from Palau, the US, the UAE, the Marshall Islands. All of them were hit. Iran was sending a very blunt, very clear message to the entire world. No one gets through. So, while the rest of the world was reeling from this massive economic shock, a really intense power struggle was unfolding inside Iran. With the supreme leader dead, the big question became, who's actually giving the orders? This was the slogan that was reportedly being chanted from homes and windows by protesters in Iran. It was aimed at one man, Mujtaba Khamenei, the son of the leader who had just been killed. His potential succession was, to put it mildly, controversial. A lot of people saw it as a step back towards a monarchy. On March 8th, Mujtaba was officially named the new supreme leader, but his rise to power was immediately just consumed by mystery. Word was he was injured in the same strike that killed his father. And since his appointment, he hasn't been seen or heard from in public, not once. Every official communication has been a written statement. This created a massive leadership vacuum at the absolute worst possible moment. So, you've got this ghost leader in Tehran, the Strait is completely sealed off, and the conflict settles into this grinding, devastating new phase, one with huge consequences for the global economy and for military planners everywhere.
The military fight pretty much became a brutal numbers game. See, Iran has this huge arsenal of relatively low-cost but still very effective ballistic missiles. In response, the US and Israel had to use these incredibly sophisticated and wildly expensive interceptors, things like THAAD and Arrow 3. It created a war of attrition with a simple, stark reality. You can always build more cheap missiles than your opponent has expensive interceptors.
And the economic pain, it wasn't just about oil. Europe gets a ton of its liquefied natural gas from Qatar, which of course is inside the Gulf. So its natural gas prices, they doubled. Almost overnight, we're talking from 30 to 60 euros per megawatt hour. This directly threatened to send household energy bills soaring across the whole continent. The blockade created this catastrophic logistical backup, like a traffic jam that rippled all the way back from the sea to the oil fields. First, the tankers are trapped. Okay. Then, the onshore storage tanks, they all fill to the brim. With nowhere left to put the oil, producers like Iraq, Kuwait, and Qatar have no choice. They have to literally shut down their fields. And finally, they're forced to declare force majeure, which is basically a legal notice saying they can't honor their supply contracts. The scenario we've just walked through, it's based on a really detailed analysis, but yes, it is fictional. The vulnerability it exposes, though, that is terrifyingly real, and it forces us all to ask a really critical question. In a world that's defined by these fragile supply chains and geopolitical flashpoints, just how prepared are we for the day a scenario like this is no longer just a simulation?